This episode of the Jesse T Show is brought to you by 46 and 2 Wealth Partners. This year, many people have lots of money questions. Finding the right information can be tough, and more importantly, finding someone that you like and have confidence in is even tougher. If you'd like to keep more of your money, and more importantly, if you'd like to stop trading time for money and live the life you deserve, contact 46 and 2 Wealth Partners today. Right now, Jesse T Show listeners will receive a free 15-minute phone call that will leave you with at least one idea on how to keep or make more money. Text promo code Jesse T Show to phone number 202-301-4503. Candler, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. It's been amazing how people have been connecting through these last few months. And there's a mutual friend of ours, John Sterling, who was on the podcast a while back, and he's an amazing dude. He helps people, was helping people that are athletes transition from being an athlete, and then military, transitioning from military. The big thing there is identity. When you leave the jersey or the uniform behind and step into a new world, there can be like a whole mindset shift that takes place. And so he was helping people do that. And I know that you connect. How did you connect with John?
I actually met John at a charity event before the Super Bowl when it was in Atlanta.
Yep.
I guess about a year and a half ago now.
I was there and watched my home team, the Patriots.
and from there, just spoke with him, and then he had me speak at an MVP event. And I actually went back a few times after that, just because I enjoyed it so much, just the camaraderie and the talks that would happen after each workout.
Yeah, so MVP, Merging Vets and Players. I know he was doing some work with them, and he's a big Army guy, been in the Army for a while, and so he understands kind of the ideas that really kind of are on both sides. As an athlete, you deal with like dedication, teamwork. You got your jersey. People look at you a certain way. You have to operate a certain way at a higher level than most people. I mean, for college athletes, which you were one, and we'll get into that in a second. It seems like you have a couple full-time jobs. You're almost operating as like a CEO of a company because you're getting up so early and you're training and you're working out and you're eating right and you're sleeping and you're trying to get good grades and you're trying to potentially have a social life, if that's even possible. And that's ongoing. And so he helps people that have left that world at a pro level, maybe even some college folks. And then also military, which was what I was, where people look at you a certain way and they carry you in a certain light, for the most part, really high in a high esteem. Some people, depending on what part of the world you're in, they might give you a little shit for being in the military. But for the most part, those two identities are similar, where when you leave, it's like, what do I do now? And so he helps people with that transition. So did you experience any of that? Did you have any kind of like, when you left being a football player to go into corporate America, did you kind of have any identity like struggles, or were you able to pivot pretty easy?
I was able to pivot pretty easily, and I think it was because the big distinction being that I didn't play professionally. At the time, I finished up at the end of college, felt like I accomplished everything I set out to, but that was also when I was graduating,
Yep.
And so it timed well for me to go ahead and just make the switch. For a lot of athletes, like old teammates of mine that went on to the NFL, they never really knew at what point they were going to be finished playing sports,
Yep.
and at what point that they would have to come out and start their professional lives. And so they were always so focused on staying at the top of their game because there's so much training that goes into playing a sport professionally.
For sure.
And they want to continue to do that as long as possible. And then sometimes it's abruptly ended. It's an injury, or they get cut after seemingly they were going to be a big piece of a team, and then it's kind of a what now moment. But since mine was really more just it ended perfectly. I graduated. A week later, we had the bowl game, and then that was the end of my college experience. So it aligned well.
Out. Yeah. There's this mindset in general to be an athlete or to be doing something operating at a high level. And yours is unique to most because as we talked and we've gotten to know each other, you've told me that you weren't blessed with, the same gifts as a lot of people were that played at that level. And so you really kind of had to backdoor your way in and be creative and figure out how to put in a ton of work to get to even play. And so walk us through that process of, kind of like where your sports background stemmed from, the sports that you were in, and then like how you were actually were able to walk on to UGA and then actually play.
Sure. So I always played a lot of sports growing up. My parents had me doing swimming, baseball, wrestling, basketball, football, soccer. As I got into middle school, I started kind of try to specialize in a few, really, with that being football, wrestling, and baseball. And then in high school, just focused on football and wrestling, and always had a knack for wrestling, was very talented at it. But football just did not come easily to me at all, but I really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. Wrestling for me, because I've been doing martial arts since 2011, like I've dabbled in jiu-jitsu, but I'm a striker and I love to hit and be hit. When I get hit, you don't know who you are until you get hit in the face, because either you shell up and you kind of like back down, or you step into the fire and go at it. So it's interesting that, that psychology there. But for wrestlers, and I know a little bit about wrestlers, some of the hardest working athletes that are out there in terms of, doing weight cuts and, making sure you maintain weight, making sure that you're strong and that you're able to perform. And so what was your career like with wrestling? I know you kind of achieved and went to states all your high school years, but like talk about your wrestling experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was something that I really enjoyed a lot. And it was a good sport for me because it neutralized a lot of the weaknesses. Like I wasn't very fast, but the wrestling ring isn't very big. In some ways, it doesn't matter a lot how fast you are. And wasn't very strong. But again, I was wrestling against guys in my weight class. But I was always very technical and able to kind of control the match, where it would be, whoever I was facing would have to wrestle the kind of match that I wanted us to wrestle.
You dictated the pace, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, from a young age, my dad helped me focus in that a lot. He had me practicing, where in middle school I would practice with the middle school team, and then I'd practice with the varsity team. I couldn't compete with them yet. And then sometimes after that I would go to a third wrestling practice. It was just like a gym specialized in Southeastern wrestling training.
And this was all in one day. So 3 practices, and you're in school still, and still a young kid, and it's incredible. I'm sure that instilled some of the work ethic, because some of those wrestlers, most of them that I've ever met, are just some of the hardest working people I know in sports. And just it's incredible what they can do. And so that probably built, I'd imagine, a foundation or a layer of that mentality that you needed to be able to carve into this new sport, which was football. And you said you played baseball as well. But I think it's really interesting and talk about your experience with football, because you didn't, have the traditional path. Like, you carved your own path. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. It was very different. It ended up stemming from just my love for football was so deep. It was more than all the other sports combined, even though I did enjoy other sports, that I just decided that that's what I wanted to focus on. So when high school sports were winding down, I just decided that I was going to put, all my athletic pursuits into just football and trying to walk onto the team, still without a clear idea of what it would take to do that in terms of, exactly how many spots are on the team, when are tryouts, do they even have tryouts, things like that. But I still made the conscious decision to go from, kind of having several different sports to specializing in just one of them.
Yeah. And for you, we were talking about it a little bit, like how was the actual process of figuring out how to get to play UGA football? Once you identified this was something you wanted to chase, you made that mindset leap of committing. How did you get your foot in the door? Because I guess walking on in general for most people is very low chances of making the team. So you did something right. You made the team and you were able to get through that process. So how did you filter through that process and some of the things that you did to be able to get onto the team?
Sure. Well, the first thing was, I knew it was a big, scary goal. I didn't tell anyone, but summer before my freshman year, I was at an event and ran into a guy that I played against in high school. And he mentioned that he was going to be trying out as a kicker that fall. And he mentioned the name of the coach who was in charge of the tryout, which incidentally was someone that I'd met years before then when I was a kid, when I went with my dad for his company's Employee Appreciation Day at a UGA practice. And so I at least had a name to go off of. And then from there, I started working out and trying to gain weight, and then made a decision that the day before classes started freshman year, I was just going to show up at the football building and ask to speak with Coach Tereshinski, who was in charge of the program.
Yep.
And when I walked in, I had kind of rehearsed what I would say, where I would try to tell him I wanted to try out, but give as little detail as possible, because I had never started a game in high school.
Yep.
I didn't have any stats. There was no highlight tape or anything like that.
Yep.
And so when I walked into the building, I'm still thinking through exactly how I want to phrase it. And I just see a hand hold the elevator open, and it was actually Coach Tereshinski on the way down in the elevator.
Wow, okay.
And
elevator pitch.
and so the whole pitch was, he looked at me and he said, are you the guy that wanted to try out? And I just said yes.
Beautiful.
And he said, all right, well, the meeting starts in 5 minutes. I'll take you downstairs.
Wow.
So he
serendipity.
Never asked my name, probably had me confused with somebody else, to be frank.
Yeah.
And just said yes, because I showed up in some athletic clothes at the right time.
Yep.
And
wow.
He walked me right into the meeting. And when I saw the other guys that were in that meeting room, like they were not just your average athletes. A lot of those guys started for multiple years in high school. A couple of them had even started for schools like Georgia Southern and were now transferring in to try to become walk-ons.
So these were like
Georgia.
men. Like you looked at. So when I was playing high school basketball up in East Boston, I was on JV and I was in 9th grade, and I remember looking at the seniors that were on varsity, and they just looked like completely different human beings. Like in my mind, like I'm looking up at all of them, they're all dunking and they're doing crazy stuff, and they're super fast and big and strong, and I'm like this little, at the time maybe like 5'6", 140-pound kid, like just like an average sized 9th grader. And I later grew in life, but it was weird playing with these men. Like I felt like they were just like beating my ass. Like, like it was just like there was no way to keep up with them. But you were able to identify, I think, that you needed to bulk up and that you needed to get stronger. And what was that process like? Because I know that you said you put on like an incredible amount of weight in like a relatively short amount of time. And how did that help you in the sport?
Sure. So it really just grew out of me knowing that it was a necessity to do that. No coach ever advised me or came up with any plan or anything like that. When you're trying out for the team and haven't even made the team yet, they're not going to invest a lot of time in coming up with some kind of individual
You're an outlier
plan for you. Yeah, exactly. So I really just started Googling what a lot of football players, like there's some NFL players that have blogs that detailed like what they ate, what they did for training.
What was your talk? Because I'm really big into like health and wellness and what people call biohacking, but talk about like what you were eating and like the protocol and like was it X amount of protein and all the different maybe supplements, like what were you working with to get to be able to basically like change your body?
Sure.
Yeah.
So started the fall of my freshman year, I weighed 145, and I decided I was going to start off eating 6 healthy meals a day because I saw that's what some NFL players and a lot of bodybuilders did.
For sure.
And so, no sweets, no excessively fatty foods, but examples like for breakfast, I would usually have either some bacon or sausage, sometimes eggs or egg whites, and I'd put with that like either some grits or oatmeal, and I'd try to use Splenda or something kind of healthy in oatmeal just to give it a little taste.
A little flavor. Yeah.
Then lunch, it could be something as simple as a sandwich, or it could be steak and baked potatoes or fish, sweet potatoes. UGA's dining hall had a lot of selection, and it was all you can eat as many times as you wanted. Yeah, they did.
Really? Was it good steak?
Yeah, it was very good.
Wow.
They had
incredible
sushi, stir fry. It was kind of impressive, the selection they had.
All you can eat.
Yes.
So it's probably like the football player in athlete's heaven. They just go and just chow down.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's awesome.
So I did that 6 times a day, and it really worked. That was the first time I'd ever in my whole life really focused on gaining weight.
Yep.
And by the end of that semester, I was up to 185 and pretty much all good weight.
40 pounds.
In 16 weeks.
That's incredible. That's like most people would think that you were cheating to get to that level, But
I think it's because most of the guys had already been working out as hard as they could for years and
they've
years.
already hit that level. And you're just getting there.
Right. Yeah. I knew my way around a gym, but I'd never really tried to gain weight before. Yeah. And so sometimes you get like an initial burst when you first really start jumping into something.
For sure. Yeah. But 40 pounds in just a semester in college is impressive. And a lot of it's clean weight, which, you could put on 40 pounds the wrong way, and it's just only going to hurt you in a lot of ways. Definitely won't do well for sports and your health. But what was your lifting protocol? Were you doing a lot of compound movements, like just big mass stuff like deadlifts and squats and just trying to like make yourself thicker? Or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of compound movements. I would say a lot of deadlifts, squats, bench, and cleans as well, just for football.
Yep.
A lot of like dumbbell, weights, and then probably at the end of the workout, like 20 to 25% machine work.
Yep.
And then we'd end each day with abs, and then a good amount of conditioning, whether it was 40-yard dashes or 110s.
Like real time, real prep for running in a game. You need the cardio for sure. So at the end of that first semester, and you've gained 40 pounds, like how did your mindset shift? Were you getting more confident? Did you see your abilities in practice or in the game? Were you actually on the team yet? And if so, like did you see how that was helping you in terms of how you changed your body?
I did see how it was helping me, but I was not on the team yet. So the way that it worked, they actually have tryouts each spring.
Okay.
But for only incoming freshmen and transfers, they were allowing people to work out with the team that first
that's
fall.
cool. Yeah.
So while I couldn't practice, I was in the gym with the team, and then
every time they were in there, you were with them. So you got
Plus
the
a couple more
exposure,
times.
building some relationships. Like you kind of started becoming part of the team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so spring of my freshman year, they let myself and the other guys in that group that were still remaining try out. And there were also some other guys that had just transferred in that semester that were trying out. So on the whole, there were probably about 40 guys or so. And then later they only ended up taking, I believe, 10 or 11 of them.
Wow. Okay.
So it was some pretty steep competition.
Big time.
And it was a really interesting experience. January was all about like workouts with the full team.
Yep.
Then after that in February, we transitioned into mat drills, which were just grueling. I mean, we were doing them at 4:30 in the morning.
What's a mat drill? It sounds like a wrestling thing. Is it? It's not wrestling.
It's
right?
on a wrestling mat.
Is it really?
It's not wrestling each other, but it's on a mat. But they're really intense conditioning and mental toughness drills.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them involve, there's one where there's a chute that's maybe about 3.5 feet high off the ground, and you have to chop your feet under it for a very, very long time. And then there's
like
another
flutter
one.
kicks?
No, like just sprint, your feet, running your feet in place.
Got it.
Then there are other drills where you have to shuffle back and forth to cones. There are 2 different drills where there are ladders.
Yep.
And if you ever snag a ladder, or if you just run a little slower than they think you should, or if they just kind of want to see what you're made of, the coaches will give you a thumbs down.
Oh, no.
And so
That sounds bad.
A lot of the times they'll give either one group or one person multiple thumbs downs in a row just to see what happens.
Shit.
And I would say in the first day, probably more than half the team could not complete it.
Wow,
including some of the starters, some of the All-American guys.
Okay.
However, if you were trying out to be a walk-on and you quit at any point, they just wrote down your name and said, just don't come back.
Wow. Meaning, when you say quit, like what did that look like? Just like you didn't complete an exercise?
That could be, yes, if you don't complete an exercise, if the trainer rules that you're just too out of shape, or if you just walk to the side to throw up, you're just done.
Wow. Even that's part of like martial arts for years. There's times where I've like I actually don't think I've ever thrown up, but I've been many times like right at the edge, and like I could have thrown up if I wanted to, and I think that's pushing the limits. You know what I mean? And so I don't even I would see actually I have thrown up before in training. So coming back, like as long as you come right back after you throw up, but I guess it just showed that mental toughness that you had to just like keep it all together. You know, that's interesting.
There were even 2 guys that were trying out that they were a little older. They had already served as Marines, and they said that it was no joke, that kind of training. Like they had to kind of go back to their some of their boot camp days in order to make sure they made it through it, because it's not really related to football per se. It's really more about mental toughness. And so some of the guys that are just beasts on the field, it doesn't translate as well.
Yeah, because a lot of their genetic gifts maybe don't translate over to that mental toughness that we were talking about a while ago, where you could have all the gifts in the world and you could be blessed with things, but like you may not have the work ethic or that mental toughness, and it just derails you. But you remind me of a big thought leader and a guy I follow named David Goggins, and he talks about going into your cookie jar and like pulling out, like he's ex-military, Navy SEAL, badass guy, ultra marathon runner, but he didn't start off that way. He built himself into this guy, and he talks about the cookie jar where you have these things that, especially in boot camp, there's shit that happens to you, because I'm ex-military too, that like you can pull back on, like you said, those Marines and Marines are some of the toughest, like front line, like not being special forces, military personnel that there are. And so for them to have that mentality of like, shit, this is hard, I have to like reach back deep to kind of get through this, it must have been grueling to get through that. Incredible. So
and it can be tough too when you're part of a group where you keep getting sent back because 2 of the people next to you keep not doing it, and you keep doing it well every time, and it's only on those guys.
So let me ask you this then. So for you, were you ever, I'm sure maybe a couple occasions, but were you the one that kept on, like, did you fuck it up for other people, and like were people like starting to like turn on you and be like, dude, let's pick it up, like, come on?
No, I didn't too much.
Okay.
When I ever got sent back, it was usually just because I wasn't quite running as fast as I thought I should, even though that was actually my max speed.
Your top speed.
But no, I mean, precision-wise, I didn't like trip on the rope ladder or hit the chute on the way in or anything like that.
Was your mindset, like, walk us through, like, as you're going through this and you know that you feel probably like all eyes are on you in terms of like getting cut or like not making, your goal. were you just more dialed in and almost in a flow state of like where you weren't going to mess up with the rope ladder or like dog it, so to speak, and not push it? Was that top of mind for you? And like, were you kind of always in this fight or flight mode of like survival?
Yeah, I'd say I always was. I mean, I tried to almost like basically take my mind to like somewhere else to try to not focus on the pain of it. Like I would try to think back, and I guess my own cookie jar moment, like I would think back on some of the wrestling practices that I did. Like there were some times where I would have to lose a good amount of weight before a match, and it would be my third straight practice of the day, and I ran 10 miles before the first practice.
Yeah.
And I would have done all of that with 2 sets of sweats on, and usually the practice room was like 90 degrees, and I would just feel like my body was like about to die on me, but I would still have to keep pushing. And there were some times where, you know, the day after that, you're just emaciated, and you know you're going to have to wrestle somebody that's a state champ, and you just have to kind of forget about like the pain that you're going through and just find a place to win.
Of wrestlers, man, is so admirable, and being able to do that. I mean, 10 miles just by itself is a great workout. And then if you get to work out 3 other times after that, and then you get to get ready for someone who's a monster and someone who wants to tear your head off, so to speak. I mean, that just the mindset that you have to have and the belief in yourself, and maybe even just shutting off the noise, like that voice that we all get in our head that says, quit, or what are you doing to yourself? Like take the easy way out. Learning how to temper that and shut that off, I think, is the difference between good and great. I think that's a lot of people that you see talk about those mindset tricks. So now you're, practicing, doing all the drills, the mat drills, you put on 40 pounds. And so how do you actually burst through and get your first taste of success of saying, you know what, you're on the team, or like there's some hope for you to kind of get on the team?
Sure.
Yeah.
So right after mat drills, we went to spring practice in the spring game, and the coaches after that decided to make cuts, and I was told that I did not make the team. And so the rest of that summer after my freshman year, all the way through the fall, I decided to, I was working out on my own, got a couple guys that I was training with, and by the time I came back to start fall of my sophomore year that semester, my weight was up to 200.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I decided that I was going to try to gain 2 pounds every single week for the 16-week semester. So my goal was to get to 232.
Yep.
And I had stopped gaining weight at 6 meals a day, so I got up to 8 meals a day.
Wow.
At this
Were
point,
you waking up in the middle of the night?
No,
sloshing down.
I had to schedule my classes around it. I could never have more than one class in a row. So it was always eat class, eat class, eat class.
Can you imagine the dedication of someone in college doing that, where they're like, and you can because you've done it, but like for most people, they don't understand the concept of that. Like you build your whole college schedule around feeding, like your eating time. And so you just bumped up to 8 meals a day. And at that point, was that enough to kind of get you the calories that you were needing to bump you to 2 pounds a week?
It was.
Yeah.
I pretty consistently gained weight that fall, and had a fun intermediate goal with some of my friends where we competed in the strongest dog. It was like a powerlifting championship at UGA. So
nice.
It was something good to look forward to, that we were all gunning towards together, trying to make sure that we were hitting personal bests that day.
Iron sharpens iron, and it's like if you have a group of people that are operating at a level that are pushing towards this goal, it gets competitive, it gets the juices flowing, and gets you. So how did you perform in that event? I know you said that you weren't naturally strong or gifted when it came to certain things like that, but do you feel like you performed better because of the work that you had put in up until that point? Like where did you land in that competition?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I won my weight class. I believe I was 3rd overall.
Oh wow. Okay. Nice.
But I had the highest deadlift of anyone, and I hit personal bests for all of my lifts. So I mean,
wow.
But when I had started college, my bench was around 165 and squat was around 190.
Yep.
This was about a year and 2 months later, and by that point my bench was 275 and my squat was 425.
It's incredible.
So they'd improved significantly, but I had also been working on speed training the whole time.
Yep.
When I got to school, I only ran a 5.640, which is too slow to play any position.
Yeah.
So that had to improve a lot while I was putting on size.
Yeah. What were you doing for speed drills? Were you doing just sprints and kind of like shuttle stuff? Like what was the protocol to get faster?
It was really, sprints, agility, shuttle, things like that. I never ran really anything longer than 110 yards because it's not as applicable to football.
Yeah.
And also, longer distance running like I had done in high school usually can help you like tone up and maybe lose a little weight, and that's the last thing I wanted to do.
Right.
So I would never run anything longer than a 110. Now I might run 20 110s in a day, but never anything longer than that.
Football specific training.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then at the end of that semester, I spoke with Coach Tereshinsky again and asked to try out, and he said yes. And so then tried out, this is the second time, spring of my sophomore year, again as a linebacker.
Yep.
And at that point, I actually decided to, during the month of January when we were working out, to lose a little weight.
Okay.
Because I had put on so much over the last few years that I knew if I went into mat drills around 230 pounds, which I had exactly hit my goal the previous semester. I ended at 232. From there, I probably lost about 15 pounds or so, just knowing that I had to be able to move and move quickly. And so,
suck and win.
Yes, exactly. And so after mat drills, then spring practice started, and I started basically trying to just make sure that I was doing the best I could at like position-specific drills, like linebacker drills, and thought I was pretty close to making it, and met with my position coach at the end after the spring game, and he mentioned that they had already made cuts and that they did not have room for me.
Oh, wow.
And so I was really disappointed, and I went back to my locker and I saw there was a comment sheet on it where coaches could add their commentary, and one of the coaches had written on there that while I had improved, that I was too small, too slow, average strength, a Division III player at best, and that I should strongly consider giving it up.
Wow. Wow, your face just changed. I don't know if the camera caught that, but you were like, your face totally said "motherfucker." Like your eye like dialed in. You almost went like Terminator for a second. So what was that feeling that landed for you when you saw that?
It was tough. I mean, brutal. So I had just come from a meeting where my coach, he was more encouraging than that, but he had basically told me that they didn't have room for you. And then so I'm walking to a locker to clear out all my stuff. So just the image of, I need to erase any evidence that I was here so somebody else can take that over.
Yeah.
That was already bad enough. And then I got that comment card and looked at it and was just blown away.
Kick you while you're down.
Because I had even had, like, one of the assistant strength coaches told me that, he wasn't the one deciding, but that in his mind, he thought that I should be able to make it because he had a good idea for having seen the walk-on groups work out, that in his mind, I was either very close or he had said he thought I'd have a good chance at it. And so to hear that was really, really discouraging. And I was pretty angry, to be honest. I walked out of the building and had my iPod, which may tell how long ago this was. This was around
8 gigs.
Yeah, this is 2009. So I put on my iPod and started just blaring heavy metal music and walking.
Who's your heavy metal band of choice?
At the time, I would say Five Finger Death Punch.
Yeah.
I like them a lot, and they were pretty new. I believe they had come out with 2 albums then, and they were getting ready to come out with a 3rd.
Yep.
And I just started walking, and I walked for probably 5 minutes, and then I just stopped all of a sudden. I realized where I was, and I was right at the bridge that overlooks UGA's football stadium.
Oh, man.
And I just started looking out on it, thinking that there was no way that there could be 125 guys in the world that wanted to play specifically for UGA worse than I did.
Yeah.
And so I committed to myself to be willing to take a step back and change the things I needed to change, push harder in the areas where I needed to push harder, but do whatever it took to make the team. Because at this point, 2 years of eligibility are gone. I have 2 years left.
Yep.
That's it to make this dream happen. After you graduate, you can't go back and play sports. And so from there, decided to kind of double down on my meal training since my weight had stopped increasing.
Yep.
I went to 9 meals a day. And then
just for some context, I intermittent fast. I don't eat usually but like 4 or 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
And like in those 4 or 5 hours, maybe 2 meals.
Yeah.
To eat 9 meals in a day. That's incredible.
I now do something similar to that a lot of days where I'll have lunch and dinner and that's just kind of it for the day.
So now you added the 9th meal. What were some of the segments of your training or your focus that you said would either have to evolve and become better, or maybe you were already good so you can kind of like lay off of them? Like what did you change to be able to like show up better for the coaches to give yourself a better chance?
So one was I got a new workout partner, and I was still willing to work out with the guys that I had been working out with, but I had heard through the grapevine of this one guy named Jarrett Moore, who was huge into powerlifting. I mean, he was, if he would have played football in college, he probably would have been the strongest player on Georgia's team.
Saying a lot.
Maybe not for bench press, but definitely for squat and deadlift.
Yeah. Which is a big thing. And, obviously all 3 of those lifts they look at highly in football, but for squat and deadlift, I mean, that's just overall strength for a lot of football players, using their legs and their bodies to tackle and to run through things. And yeah, that's incredible.
So I started training with him, and he helped me dial in some specific exercises to start adding.
Yep.
And I started doing a lot of reading. I came across the site Animal Pack,
Yep.
which they're known for like supplements and vitamins, things like that. And the ironic thing was, as a college kid, I couldn't even really afford their protein powder and stuff. But I would read all of their articles where they have a lot of guys that are professional bodybuilders that will write about like life and nutrition and weightlifting and how it all plays in
stuff
together.
that you could implement without just time and effort. Like, you didn't have to pay for that stuff. You would sit there, learn it, implement it. So you could take some of what they were offering and add it to your game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I decided that I was going to change positions, which was a risky, maybe even radical move. So I decided I was going to play defensive end.
Yep.
Never played it a single snap at any level before.
Yep.
Just taught myself how to play by watching YouTube videos.
That's awesome.
But I decided to do that because it would help minimize my greatest weakness was my speed.
Yeah.
I dropped my 40 all the way from 5'6" down to 5'0".
Okay.
Which
Great.
I made progress. However, that's still very slow for college football.
Yeah, for DN, right? They're what, in the mid fours, upper fours?
DNs, well, at the NFL level, they can probably run a 4.8 or 4.9. In college, I'd say 4.8 to 5.0 isn't
So right
bad
where
for
you
a DN,
were, yeah.
But if I had stayed as a linebacker, it's bad.
Yeah.
So I basically just decided the closer I could move to the football, the slower I could be, and I could still keep gaining weight.
Yep.
And so that was a big change. But that summer after I was cut my sophomore year, I was working out in Atlanta with Jarrett Moore. And I went back to the gaining 2 pounds a week throughout the whole summer.
Yep.
So came back that fall, and I was at 242.
Wow.
And then actually at that point, my weight gain had started to stagnate a little bit.
Yep.
And I knew I really needed to put the pedal to the metal because I only had a few more months until I'd try out again spring of my junior year. And so I added a 10th meal each day at that point. So now I'm eating at least once every hour and a half.
That's incredible.
And
Were you getting bored? Like, your mouth getting sore from all the chewing? Like are you just like so sick and tired, or were you actually enjoying it?
No, enjoying maybe a stretch too far. I didn't absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
And the one good thing was, since I did not have much of a social life in college, the one good thing was I could eat with everybody.
Yeah.
Because I could have 4 lunches a day.
And you would just be able to mix and mingle with people.
So if I had some of my friends that had classes with me, or if it was some teammates, or some of my fraternity brothers or something, I couldn't go out with them, but yeah, I could get lunch with anybody.
You're the lunch buddy. Damn, man. So 10 meals a day. Like, I can't even. I don't even have 10 meals sometimes in 3 or 4 days these days. Just because I'm focused on certain things. But still the same protocol. Still like the all you can eat Georgia lunches. They had the plethora of all these great things to choose from. And so now you're knocking on the door of playing defensive end, which I played in high school. And from what I've seen, because I haven't played at the college level, but those dudes are big. And then, like, as soon as those are the same guys that go in the NFL and they get a little bit heavier, but some of those guys are monsters.
Yeah.
6.5 feet tall, taller than that, like, close to 300 pounds. Like, how did you got to be around, 6 feet, give or take?
Yeah, a little taller than that.
Yeah, like 6'1", and 240 pounds. That's a decent sized day-to-day human being. But for football, especially the DN, that's still kind of, in my mind, I would say, undersized. So how did you apply, what you had working for you, even the 240 and the 6'1"? Like, how were you able to make that work at that position?
Yeah, and one thing I will add to that, and then I'll answer it, is we actually changed from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense, which requires even bigger defensive ends.
Yeah.
The good part is it requires even slower defensive ends.
But, so you had one of the two.
But the guys that started defensive end for Georgia were all 300 plus on the outside at D end. On the inside, we had 2 guys that each had to cut down to 365, or the coaches told them they couldn't play.
That's crazy. Imagine having to cut down to 365. Versus bulk up to 250, like cutting down because you're over 400 pounds or close to it. It's insane. That's a big human.
So around when I got to 255, I stopped gaining weight again, and I still had another about month and a half until I tried out. And so at that point, I could not fit any more solid calories in the day. Every meal, I would leave the dining hall feeling like I was one bite shy of throwing up.
You gorged yourself.
And so I decided to add a bunch of liquid calories.
Yep.
One of the dining halls that happened to be right next to my dorm has smoothies.
Yep.
You can actually custom make them, or they have a bunch. They have one that's like peanut butter and banana, which is perfect for gaining weight.
Yep.
So I started having
somewhat healthy, tastes good.
Yeah. I started having about 8 of those a day, and then I started drinking 2 gallons of whole milk a day.
Wow. So your job, full-time job, is pretty much just eating at this point. Yeah. But here's the thing, though. A lot of people, because I've been around strength and conditioning for a better part of my life, and working out and things like this. A lot of people don't have that dedication. A lot of people that do need to put on size. I've never heard of someone eating 10 to 12 or 8 to 10 meals a day and then adding shakes and all these different things. I mean, you just don't hear that. So I think there's a special mindset and a special belief, or maybe just a never say die mentality that you had to have to be able to do that. And so now you're in this protocol where you're just eating for a living. And so how are you seeing changes happen and affect you there?
It really kept the progress going when I was able to do that. I tallied it up. It was a little over 15,000 calories every day.
That's insane.
and I was burning a lot of that off while I was practicing, but I was able to keep a lot of that on and gain muscle mass. And so at the end of that semester, I was 265 and walked into the coach's office and asked if I could try out. And there was no hesitation in his voice. He just said, of course. And this is after, before hearing that I should never come back.
Yeah, everything that you had done at this point, were you building kind of a reputation as a huge UGA diehard, but then also someone who wasn't going to give up? Were people starting to talk about you in a certain light, like coaches or other players? Were you starting to build a little camaraderie as the guy that just wasn't going to stop?
I would say that. Yeah, I would say it was that, and also knowing that I just didn't really have the athletic ability that anyone else had. But overall, yeah, I would say that was about the reputation that was developing.
You started at 140 and you went to 265.
145
at this point?
to 265. So this is about 3 years. I've gained 120 pounds.
You put on another human.
Yeah, I got faster.
And now most of this was pretty clean muscle for the most part, clean
Yeah, my
weight.
body fat percentage really didn't go up much at all.
That's incredible. That's almost unheard of, because you hear most people's plight when they're working out is gaining muscle or gaining size. I guess it's just calories in, calories out, and the effort, the work that you put into it.
And being willing to stick with it and going through cycles. There were times where I'd work hard for 3 months at gaining weight, and then I would deliberately lose 10 pounds or something over the next 2 months, and then I'd be ready for another cycle. It was just, it wasn't 36 months straight of constantly gaining weight. There were definitely cycles.
You need those reprieves, and to not get burnt out, to not get injured, a mental respite, because if you're just hard charging for 36, you're just, one more bite of food is going to be I'm not doing it. I'm just done.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're 265, and you're going into your junior year at this point?
Yeah, so spring of my junior year to try out to be on the team that fall.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I show up, they have us do a physical every year. They want to make sure everyone's in good enough shape to play.
Yep.
And immediately I was the only person picked out of the whole room to get tested for steroids, because the lady had my weight chart from the last 3 years.
Right. Well, that's what I thought too. I was because I know people that have done steroids, and it's whatever, your body, your choice. And but to go from 145 to 265 in relatively short amount of time with clean weights, that's not normal, for most people. So that's why you're special, is because of that mindset and that work ethic. But so how did that experience go? Did they actually draw blood? What did they do?
I laughed. Well, it was a urine test or whatever. But they were basically as soon as it came back, they were well, look, welcome to Georgia. You've got a spot on the team.
Heck yeah, nice. So that was your last barrier to entry.
And so, and I had the same meeting with my position coach, the same one where I'd been cut the last 2 years. And this time he was just so matter of fact, he always expected me to make it. It was just, here's what we think you can help. I'd like you to work on this and this. And just kind of giving advice as if he just always expected me to make it.
Beautiful. Now, just because, I'm the lay person when it comes to college sports, but I'd imagine, definitely in pro sports it's rampant, but is there, not UGA specific unless you want to talk about it, but are there college teams that are participating in illegal substance, whether it's steroids or, any kind of PEDs or peptides, things that just maybe whatever governing agency says you can't use? Are there people actually taking part in that at that level?
I don't believe so. So really? I never saw it or even heard of it. I think from what I heard, it actually was pretty prevalent in the 90s. There were certain teams that got busted big time for that.
Yep.
But by the time I was there, everyone on the team would get tested often enough that it would have to be so perfectly timed for someone to get away with it. And almost every failed drug test you hear at the collegiate levels for someone using marijuana, it's never for steroids. I think in all of the major conferences in football, I think I've heard of one guy using PEDs in the last 20 years, and that was Will Greer with Florida.
Okay.
And he later transferred to West Virginia. But I've never heard of anyone else getting
That's
busted
incredible
for
because,
that.
I mean, a lot of these human beings are just specimens. They look like they're carved out of stone. Their genetics are through the roof. And obviously, it's not just that. Like, if we go back to the work ethic and the nutrition, all the stuff that goes into it. But, you look at a lot of, pro athletes, they definitely partake in a lot of those things. And, some don't, but some do. And so,
yeah, I agree. And to touch on your point about genetics, that's one thing I realized that I was fighting a very uphill battle was that at least 90 to 95% of my work was just to catch me up to those guys.
Yeah.
And then the last 5 or 10% could maybe give me a leg up if they didn't work as hard.
Right.
But there was one guy that I was sitting down with at the dining hall one day, and he's a defensive lineman, Geno Atkins. He's now all pro in the NFL. And I was talking with him, and we were with another one of our teammates. And this guy he's probably 6'4", 300 with a six-pack, just shredded.
That's insane.
And the other teammate that was with us was like known for skipping reps in the weight room. Like he can go to the water fountain and wouldn't come back for 3 minutes during whatever the toughest drill was. And I just asked him one day. I said, "What do you do? How are you 300 pounds fast and so lean?" And I said, "Is it were your parents just really, really big and strong and lean?" And he said, "No, I mean my parents weren't that big. My mom's like 6'4", 265. And my dad's like 6'7", 330. And I said, "What do you mean they're not that big?
Right.
They're gigantic."
Those are huge.
And so I asked him. I said, "Well, I'm just curious. What do you eat to maintain your size?" And he said, "Well, I sleep in. I usually skip breakfast, and then I'll have pizza, hot wings, and Coke for lunch, and then I'll have pizza, hot wings, Coke, and ice cream for dinner." And that's when it just kind of hit me that, okay, the first 95% of my hard work is just to even get in the same ballpark as some
the same league. Yeah, pun intended, right?
Yeah.
So it's just to even be there. I mean, can you imagine? Because most women, they don't come close to 6 feet. And his mom, she was just 6'4". Right.
Right.
Wow. Okay. So now you're getting to a point. You got past the last hurdle. They didn't believe because it's unbelievable in a beautiful way, but they didn't believe that you were like natural. Like, how could you do this to your body and like naturally do it? And you proved that you did it natural. And so now you make the cut. And like, how does your world change? Is it still very much like scarcity of like this can be pulled away at any time and I need to keep showing up and keep working harder? And like, how did that play out for you in the next,
Yeah, I would say there's a huge sense of urgency. So by the time I made it, I was going to be on the team for fall of my fourth year, which since they redshirted me when I tried out, I would be a redshirt junior that year. And then I would only have 2 more seasons total. There was a sense of urgency because there's so little time left. And because my goal wasn't to make the University of Georgia football roster, it was to play in a game. I wanted to play for Georgia. And so I had made a massive step towards it, but I was not there all the way.
You were still pretty far away, marathon away, easy.
Right.
Yeah.
And my first season on the team, I only dressed out for 2 games all year. So there weren't really, chances for me to get in. And so flipping the page into my last season, by that point, I was kind of a pro at all the off-season stuff because I'd been through it so many years.
Yeah.
But when we were getting ready for the season, everything felt like this is do or die. Like it's, I have to find a way to get into a game now or it will never happen. And it was down to the last, 3 months after years and years of work.
Yeah. And that last 3 months, that was the last stretch of the season. How long is the college football season total time? Is it 3 months?
Yeah, 3 months plus it can extend into a bowl game. But there were only certain games that I was getting into just because in general, they'll only substitute walk-ons in really when you're playing a non-Power 5 team.
Yeah.
Some people call those cupcake games.
Yeah.
But against SEC teams, there were times where we were beating someone 43-0, but just because it was a conference opponent, it could be a respect thing where you still just keep like your second or third string in. You don't really put in walk-ons.
Okay, so you ended up getting in total. How many games did you actually get in to play for a down or more?
I got it for 1 game, and so basically it all came down to the last non-Power 5 opponent we had was we were playing New Mexico State my senior season.
Yep.
And 2 days before the game, I went into my position coach's office and just told him, if we get a big lead on Saturday, I really want you to put me in. And he said, well, we haven't had a lot of big leads at this point. And I said, I know, but just this one game, if we do, I'd like you to put me in. And so end of the first quarter, we were only up 7-3. And in order for me to get to play, we needed to blow them out early because
many touchdowns.
Because after you pull away, That's when you put in the second team.
Yeah.
And then you'll put in some of the freshman scholarship guys.
Yeah.
Then you can put in the walk-ons. So you need a while with it being a blowout. You can't turn it into a blowout in the fourth quarter or something.
The clock's ticking,
right?
Literally.
And then in the second quarter, Georgia set what is still a record, and they scored 42 points in one quarter.
Wow.
Just an explosion of offense.
It's the most points in a quarter for a college football team.
in UGA history.
Wow, that's incredible. So it was serendipity.
It was the second that I needed it to happen, it happened. So we go into halftime.
The football god smiled on you.
Yeah, it was 49-3 at the half. And then, third quarter goes in. By the third quarter, they're really subbing. They're getting second team guys in. They're getting freshman guys in. So the fourth quarter rolls around. We're up 63-10, and at this point, the clock starts to go kind of fast because we're running the ball every play.
Yeah, the clock's just
and
moving.
They're running the ball every play because at that point, New Mexico State's trying to just not have anybody get hurt the rest of the game, and so the amount of plays in the fourth quarter were significantly fewer than there were the previous quarters, and so we're up 63-10, and we have the ball on offense, and I'm thinking, who's going to go on defense next drive? So I start pacing and loudly clearing my throat behind my position coach.
Were you really?
To let him know that I was there and that, thinking back on what we said 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And finally, he actually sends a graduate assistant over to go tap me on the shoulder.
Wow.
And say, hey, go ahead and start warming up. So at this point, it had been a good 3 hours since we'd had warm-ups because it's at the very end of the game. I'd been just standing around on the sideline. So I start warming up, and one other walk-on did as well. And then when the time came, we both ran out there to get in. And so when I
were you at home when this happened?
Yes.
Did everybody go crazy? Like they kind of knew your story? The people that did, were they nuts that you went out on the field?
Well, the good part about it being such a blowout is that the stands started to clear out in the fourth quarter. So all of my family and friends were right at the 50-yard line behind the bench.
Oh my goodness.
There's just this huge group
awesome.
of them because everyone else, not everyone in the stadium had left, but a lot of them
did. Yeah.
And so they were all cheering right behind me. So
special moment.
I ran in, and the first play, one of the guys who was in said he just didn't feel like playing nose guard, so he was going to line up at defensive end. And I knew that with me being the one new defensive lineman in on that drive, that if anyone messed anything up, it was going to come down to me. So I lined up at nose guard, which is not my position.
Yeah.
And take on a double team block from 2 300-pound guys on the first play.
They crush you? Did you hold your own a little bit?
I kind of held my own a little bit, but I also think they probably weren't. They were trying to just kind of stand their ground because it was a toss to the outside where the nose guard's not going to get to it anyway.
Right.
And then the next play, he said, all right, I'll switch back. So I go to D end. They run another play, and then
come your way?
No, it came right up the middle. And this time as a D end, I was on the outside.
Yep.
And the guy would have had to probably break one tackle in order for me to get there in time, but the first guy to him got him. So did not have a chance to get a tackle. And then at that point, the coaches wanted to go ahead and substitute other walk-ons, which I totally understood.
So you got 2 plays.
So I got 2 plays.
Oh, yeah, dude. So all this 4 years that got you the 2 plays, but I want to talk, because that's special. And in my mind, there's 2 thoughts you could have. Like the stadium cleared out and everybody left, and I was like, you didn't get to have that. But also, where I would be with it is the stadium cleared out and the people that mattered got to see 4 years amalgamation of all this stuff put together and just here it is. You know what I mean? It was almost like your stadium in a sense. It was you and your family and they were watching you. What was going through your mind as you're coming off that second play? Had you had this sweet feeling relief? Did you want to stay where was your head at? Was it too much to process at that moment? How was it?
No, it wasn't too much. I was just really trying to focus on doing my job in that moment and then knowing that I could later reflect on how big it was. Yeah. But by the time you substitute that far down the depth chart, we were not running the most complicated blitzes or anything like that. So, even though I didn't have much time in practice to get those reps at all, the plays we were running were basic stuff that I'd been doing for a few years. Yep. So I knew what to do, but I was so excited in that moment. And afterwards, coming off the field, I was really thinking about how there's really kind of an inverse relationship with the recognition you get and what's the most important thing.
Yes.
So actually lining up and doing those 2 plays out there, that's not really what got me there. That was the end result. Yep. But that's what people see, and the people that stuck around were able to cheer or whatever. But then you think back on all the times in the weight room where I was putting in good work, or on the practice field, and if you run a good time in conditioning or if you make a big lift, then like your buddies that are with you will pat you on the back or whatever.
That's what it's all about.
And then even going a step back from that, where I really made the team, where I went from, it was 1,163 days from when I first stepped in Coach Tarashinsky's office to when I played in a game. So more than 4 years, where I really ended up making the team were all of those lonely trips to the dining hall. It was when I was the first person there when it opened. It was when I was the last person there when it closed.
Yeah.
And it was just
chills right now.
It was sitting alone at a table, scarfing down a meal that I didn't feel like eating, and just making sure that I took down every bit of those 15,000 calories. So I feel like that's a lot of life too. Like a lot of people, you see the very end result. Like you'll see a picture of somebody who successfully climbed Mount Everest, but there aren't really like
that's
pictures.
The end product.
Yeah. You don't see the pictures and videos of them working out in order to get there. And there's no way for a picture to show how heavy that backpack was on the way up. And that's kind of what I thought as I came off the field, was just that this was so awesome, and I was so thankful that I got to have that kind of payoff, but that moment didn't happen because of just going in for 2 plays. It happened because of years worth of work that led up to that.
I'm thinking the whole time you've built this monster in your DNA, this hardworking, never say die, whatever it takes mentality that like will serve you, like especially like thinking about the military and how that was embedded in us, and thinking about a sales career that I used to have that was embedded in us, and like what it's done for my life today, like after the game, so to speak, after those things have passed, after military and after that sales career that I was doing, like it completely put me where I'm at right now, and like the life that I live right now is because of those things, that like the work that went into those things. And so you play those 2 downs, you've put in 1,163 days of blood, sweat, and tears, like completely dialed in, had your thoughts, a couple moments where you're walking to the stadium and you're listening to Five Finger Death Punch, you're like, I don't know, and then all of a sudden just kicked back in for you. How has that served you leaving football? So you finish up your career at UGA, you taught yourself a life lesson that's completely invaluable. Like you cannot pay for that life lesson. What has that done for you up until this point now, to where you can completely say, my work ethic has done this for me? Yeah,
I would say it's taught me a lot. It's taught me like the true meaning of hard work. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but most people say they are, but they don't really do that. Or a lot of situations require hard work and patience, and most people will give you one or the other, but not both. And it's also taught me to be creative in the way that I solve problems. Like there were some ways where I just had to keep pushing harder, but I could have probably tried out as a linebacker 4 times and been cut all 4 times. But I had to be willing to take a completely different approach, even though I didn't know how to play defensive end. So as an example, there was a time when I was working at finance in Home Depot where there was this really laborious report where all I was doing was taking screenshots of 70 different dashboard slides and putting them into one PowerPoint. And so I got with one guy on the team who I knew taught some classes to create batch files, which I didn't really know what that was, but I'd seen what they could do. And basically it was a way to program so that you could teach in computer language the computer to run that report for you and spit out a nice copy.
Beautiful.
And so I spent a lot of time learning from him, where I could type up one script where it wouldn't just run like, say, March's report. It would always run whatever month we were in. So I would never have to change it again.
Beautiful.
And spent a couple hours doing that, but as opposed to spending a few hours every month doing that, it was a much better way. So sometimes just changing your approach can be better, and some other times just working even harder can be better.
You learned how to hack the system and hack your life in a sense. Like, I mean, like thinking creatively, and that's like an entrepreneur's lifeblood. If you can solve problems, number one, if you can help people, but if you can do it creatively and optimize and like systematize things and lay down processes or automation, like a lot of times where you can remove yourself from the business and focus on X, Y, Z, and like let this keep humming over here because you put in that front work, kind of like that program where you taught the computer how to do these things, and you save yourself 2 hours every month perpetually. Like that's 2 hours per month that you're getting back to do something else and use your time wisely. So it's incredible that you're able to map over what you learned from your 4 years of grit, determination. Again, coming from wrestling and sports and the background that you came from, there was this like just this pattern being built. And so what's the next foray after football? Did you dive right into that career and stay in that career, or did you kind of venture out to what you're doing today? Like how did that progression take form?
It definitely was a progression. After school, I started working in insurance. I worked for Allstate for a couple of years and then worked for State Farm after that. And learned a lot of valuable sales skills, a lot of people skills, just a lot of good insurance knowledge that's good for probably any adult to have.
For sure, yeah.
And then after that, decided that it really just wasn't for me as much. I liked a lot of the financial planning aspects of it, so I already had my Series 6 and 63.
Yep.
And even though that's a smaller part of State Farm's business, I had kind of focused on some of the finance aspects of it.
Sure.
And decided I wanted to get into more of a traditional corporate finance career. So then worked at Home Depot for several years.
Yep.
Love that. They have amazing company culture.
I hear that, yeah.
And it was a fun place to work. And then from there, actually worked in errands and finance. Okay. And then later now I'm with an investment bank called U.S. Strategic Capital. And it's still finance, but it's in a way on the other side because we're lending money to small to medium-sized businesses.
Very cool. So you kind of kept down that path of finance and learning and growing and adding to your arsenal, so to speak, so that when you get to where you are now, you can be a little more dangerous because you're more worldly and you have more experience. So in your travels through all of these iterations, there was a muse along the way, and a book was thought of, conceived, and talk about what the book's about and what you've seen come from that book, whether it's personal growth, speaking engagements, relationships that have been fostered. Like, what has the book done for you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think it's done a lot. I really got the idea for it because one of my younger friends, his name is John Huff, his goal was to walk on a UGA's football team as well.
Okay.
And he was 4 years younger than me, and I mentored him and told him what to expect because a lot of the times during the tryout, they don't tell you, what's coming around the corner, but I basically told him, in January, you're going to have team workouts, and then lose 10 pounds before February because that's mat drills. And then the next month, you have to be really good at like football position-specific drills. Yep. So kind of coached him through that, and he ended up making the team. And I just thought there has to be more than just my friend John out there who could benefit from hearing this story.
Yep.
So that's when I started to put pen to paper, and those were busy times as well because I was working full-time. I was getting my MBA in the evening, and then at about 10 o'clock, I'd come home and have dinner. And then right until like midnight.
Wow. Just nose to the grindstone. Just churn and burn.
So yeah.
How many hours a night would you sleep on average?
8.
Oh, so you got your full 8. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Or I mean 7 sometimes.
Yeah, but within that window, because sleep is everything. It's there's a guy I follow. I told you I was into biohacking, but just optimizing the human body through different, sometimes ancient or sometimes like new age scientific stuff. And there's a guy I follow. His name's Paul Chek, and Paul Chek talks about. Have you heard of Paul Chek before?
I've not.
Paul Chek. He talks about the 4 doctors, and one of the 4 doctors, the main one, is Dr. Rest and/or Dr. Sleep. And if you disregard Dr. Rest and Dr. Sleep, you're going to have to go to other doctors just to be healthy. So it's super important to have 7 to 8 hours of sleep because that's restorative. That's where your immune system gets rebalanced, all these different things. So it's just I'm really mindful. I'm not perfect at it. Sometimes I get less than I need, but you need that sleep. You need to be able to operate so that you can do the book writing and you can do your business and you can get your MBA.
Yeah. When I was playing football, I went to bed because I knew I had to wake up at 6:30. I went to bed at like 10:30 every night.
Nice. Yeah. I've always been like a night owl a little bit, but I'm trying to work my way towards that 10 o'clock hour. I'm in the 11 o'clock hour now, but I'll get back. But so for you writing the book, so I'm writing a book right now, about a third of the way through, but I'm not as focused on like you were dialed in. Like every day it's a part of my life. I'm kind of just shelving it right now. Did you start what was the process? So like a lot of times I've heard 2 successful book writing ideologies. Number 1, you set an end date. This is when it has to be done by. You set a writing date. Like I have to do X amount of pages to get me to that end date and have to do these every day. Or you can even start with an outline and basically have the book kind of formulated. Like did you do any of those things, a combination of those things to actually?
Yeah. I did number 2 of those. So I actually wrote out just the outline was probably 20 pages. It just covered like high level ideas that I wanted and broke it down into chapters.
Yep.
And then from there, I would dig into each chapter, making sure I hit on one of those points. Because I know for me, option 1 wouldn't have worked as well. Because if I'm just writing a set amount of pages, I could totally look back and realize, hey, I forgot something in chapter 4, like a whole story that could have actually helped the reader. And so that made sure that I wasn't missing anything. And then later in the process, when I got in touch with my publishing company, I think my editor did a great job. She actually condensed it a good bit. Yep. Helped me see that like sometimes the start of one chapter could have actually worked better as the end of the previous chapter. And just make it more succinct so that it should take about 4 to 5 hours to read. And there's getting ready to be an audiobook copy coming out so you can listen to it that quickly.
Hell yeah.
but yeah, I would say.
Are you doing your own audio on it?
I'm not. No.
Okay.
I just based on how long the guy who's helping me with it said that you have to record for without your voice getting hoarse, I just decided that was
just sub it out. Just have somebody else do it.
Yeah. Because there was a guy who he offered to do it. That his most of his like vocal work has been in like car commercials, whiskey commercials, just kind of an all-American voice. And I just thought he'd be good for a football story.
So for this, I'm in the process of figuring out self-publishing and you know how much I want to bring other people into it, because I want to control a lot of it, and for certain reasons, for just for reaching the right people and for just control of distribution and little financial things, because it's not going to be a huge financial boom, but it's going to be for me more of an impactful thing and help people. And it's called Happy Wealth, and it's my story. A kid from Boston that shouldn't be alive, been able to live through these things, getting to a point where I'm at now, and how I did that, and then also the mentality of finance, like behavioral finance and emotional finance, and things that people don't have systems or thought processes on how to actually manage money. And then from there, 10 practical steps. If you do these 10 things, this is how you will build wealth in a relatively short amount of time. And so that's like the premise. I'm about a third of the way into where I think I'm going to be finished with the book. What's your advice in terms on like hiring like an editor or finding an editor? Because I'm assuming I'm definitely going to need to do that. And then like at least getting the book to final hard or paperback copy, like kind of that process. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it was an interesting process for me. I had to have, once I found an editor that I liked, I had to have a lot of faith in her, because I know that I'd written a lot of stuff, but she would just tell me directly, like, maybe you like this story. I don't think it's going to mean anything to the reader. Let's take it out.
Wow. That's going to be a little ego check.
Yeah, I had to really trust her, and I think she did an amazing job with it.
How did you find her? Was it a recommendation or?
Yeah, recommended through a friend. Beautiful. And that's funny, the format that you mentioned, because the way that my book is written, it has exactly 10 chapters, and each one is written with a section called Your Turn. That's a call to action for the reader to take a step towards hitting their goal, so that people aren't just saying, I want to do X, and then just kind of wishing it would happen. You have to actually take steps every day, and it takes
practical, utilitarian.
It takes each day to add up to that whole amount.
Beautiful. What's the premise of the book before we get into like maybe distribution and getting it to the final version? But like, what's the premise of the book? Is it the story? Is it like the mindset? Like, talk about that a little bit.
It's really two things. One is it's a football story. It is about that mindset and just about kind of a behind-the-scenes look at SEC football and what all goes into it. But then second, and really most importantly, it's really a self-help book, just designed to help people set and achieve their own goals.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so from when you started writing the book and then to when the book was actually a living, breathing document where you could touch it, read it, open it, feel it, how long was that process for you?
It was really over a year, because I spent a lot of time at the beginning trying to think about, should I create an outline or what should I do? And then once I got on that path and I knew what I wanted to do, then it started coming together a lot faster. And it ended up being around 200 pages, so it's not super long.
How many words is that in the book, roughly, give or take?
I'd actually have to go back and check. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, man, I'm definitely called to get this out and share this, because I know it's super helpful, and there's a lot of like practical information that even if you take tidbits of how to manage your cash flow or how to have more cash flow, I mean, it's super insightful, and I know that it's going to be helpful. And if I can do it, like anyone can do it. And that's kind of the gist of the book. But so now that you got your first book under your belt, are you thinking about a book too? And are you kind of taking a pause from the book writing for now? Like, where is that? Because I know sometimes people are like, they're ready to go, or they're just like, I'm not doing this again ever.
Yeah. I would write another one if I felt moved to. I don't have any plans to right now, but I don't want to become one of those, I'm not a writer. It's something I did on the side, but I don't want to become a writer who just says, all right, I finished. Let me just start writing something next. So
just getting back into
when I feel that there's something really worthwhile that could add a lot of value, I'd definitely be open to going through it again.
How's the distribution been of the book? I know you're about to do audio, which is I can't wait to. I get a buddy of mine, ex-State Farm agent as well. Interesting enough, because I was there too, so we were in that same world, all three of us. But he's huge into audio and sound. He has like this $100,000 studio in his downstairs of his house, and he does editing and audio for all different platforms. And I've cut stuff for the Jesse T Show podcast in his studio before, like the intro and some other stuff that we worked on. But he's given me like full access to the studio, and like so basically I'll be able to go down there and just like read my book and like different things I'm going to do that'll be kind of unique in the book. But when you look towards the audio, version of the book? Like, when do you feel like that'll be available? And when was the actual hardcover paperback available? Like, what have you seen in terms of like the reception from the marketplace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The audiobook should be in about a month or two. And I really waited a while after the hard copy book came out because I had such a burst of marketing at the beginning that I actually wanted something that was later on that would be exciting. So the book's been out around a year and a half.
Nice.
And I was very excited. I thought the marketing team that I had, which was like attached to my editor as the same publishing company, I thought they did a great job. They basically just said, tell us any sites or podcasts that you'd like to go on. And they made every single one of them except for one happen. So,
wow, beautiful.
They really got after it. And there was even one that before I decided to hire them, I had previously reached out to this one group and hadn't heard back. And when I told them that I wanted to get on with them, like 30 minutes later, they had an introductory email.
Isn't that incredible?
Ready to go.
Yeah, having the right people, having the right connections. So, incredible story. I'm excited to share this with people that, the few people who haven't heard it, and get your voice out there, get your book into more people's hands. And so when you're not focused on career and what you've done up until this point, what we've talked about, what is it that keeps you happy in terms of like day-to-day stuff, like, and especially what you're doing for business? I know you're working in finance at a high level, and so you're going to be sharp of mind, sharp of body. Like, what are some things that you're doing to take care of yourself, some things that you're into, and then like what makes you happy when you're not focusing on business?
Sure. To take care of myself, I definitely stopped eating 10 meals a day the second that I was done playing football. Yeah. I now do 2, sometimes 3 meals.
Okay. Normal,
Yeah, and I do, workouts that I do now are more to maintain fitness and like tone up some, because I'm now about, 65 pounds, give or take, less than I was.
What are you walking around at today?
200.
200, okay.
So I feel like that's a good medium between my like super skinny days in high school and then being like super
That's probably just right for a 6'1"-ish type person, because I'm about 6'1", and that's what I'm about 217, and I want to get down to about 200 and see how that feels, because I'm actually a runner, believe it or not, and I can't imagine, because I get a pretty good pace for some distance. I'm like between an 8 and 8.5 minute mile for distance, which is pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad, especially for, I don't look like a runner.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to see what the next 15 pounds, if that's going to make a big dent in my time. I know that I have to work on different things, but I'd like to see how it feels, basically. So fitness is still important to you. What are you doing to feed your mind or feed your spirit? Like, you into any kind of thought leaders, books, podcasts? Like, what are you into?
I read a lot, and that's one thing that I've really done a much better job of since the pandemic, since I have a lot of time at the house.
You can actually read a book.
I had a stack of a couple books where I had joined this group called Boost, where they once a month in non-pandemic times, they have a CEO speak to a group and you get a copy of their book afterwards. So I had, I believe, 4 books from there that I had not gotten into yet. So I've gotten caught up on a lot of reading, listened to a lot of podcasts. I love listening to Respect the Grind with Stephen Arnio.
Okay.
And I was really, really glad that I was able to go on his podcast, but I had such an interesting experience that taught me to never assume anything about anyone. Basically, my marketing team reached out to him and he said, sure, I'll have you on the podcast. And we set a date, and then later he had to postpone it. And then later he had to postpone it again. And then I heard back that he was actually not recording any new content. And so I proactively reached out to him about 3 months later, and he said he was going to start again. And they got postponed one more time. And I never said anything to him, but I'm thinking in the back of my mind, why can't he just set like a time and stick to it? And I had that happen with other sites, or if someone wanted like a clip or something, maybe they'd have to push it back once, maybe twice, but not 5 times.
Not multiple times. If you want to do something, you'll get it done.
If it was 5 times over a week, that may not even be a big deal, but 5 times that's stretched out over like 9 months or something. Well, so I go on the podcast, absolutely love it. Stefan's such a personal guy. He's Canadian. He's written a bunch of books. And he's in like real estate and coaching, but also writes a lot about personal finance and about life.
Sure.
And he wrote one book that I think is really insightful called Hard Times Create Strong Men.
Okay, yeah.
And it basically talks through, there's like an 80 to 100 year cycle in every civilization where
we're going through it right now.
Hard times create strong men, and strong men.
We were created weak for a while recently.
Strong men create good times, then good times create weak men.
I've been hearing
weak men
it
create
a lot.
hard times. So we're back at the end of that cycle. But it was such an insightful book about what it means to be a man today. And he talks about like relationships, money, career, things that people don't normally open up about.
You're talking a part of my passion project, which is the masculinity movement. The masculinity movement, it's a change, it's a brotherhood, it's a movement. And it's basically because as men, we were taught to be like not alpha, but like, I hate the term, but like toxic masculinity, like old school, like Don Draper from Mad Men, like womanizing and boozing and like hitting their kids. And then the flip side of that is like men that aren't men at all. So like the goal for me and identifying exactly what you're talking about, and seeing there's a huge need for this in the world right now is for men to show up better for themselves, number one, for their families, for their business, for their relationships. And there's ways to do that. So I put together a community a while back. Started off, there's about 100 people from around the world, but basically it was, we were reading books together that would talk about things that we didn't know or we didn't have the experience on, collaborate. There's a group of us that get together and do some physical stuff all the time. And so it's like there's just this tribe of people that are like-minded that want to leave the world a better place and step into their manhood, essentially. Yeah.
That was one of his biggest points that I love about like both his book and his podcast was that his point was that basically it's not like toxic masculinity that's hurting society, it's a lack of masculinity. And it's because like a lot of men are not being good fathers, they're not being good leaders, they're not being good employees, they're not being good husbands, and they're just not like filling the roles that they
not leading.
Need to fill.
They're not leading themselves.
And anyway, so after this podcast came out, this was months later, I was just Googling him because I was pulling up, I wanted to buy the next one of his book, After Hard Times Create Strong Men. And I saw that he had actually passed away from cancer at 33.
No way.
And then
you never know what someone's going through.
I talked with his administrative staff, and the reasons he had postponed on me were because he was going through chemo. And when he finally was told that he had already beaten colon cancer once, then it came back, and the doctor told him there was just nothing left to do.
Wow.
And so what he did was he said he was not recording any more new content, and he actually went into the jungle in Costa Rica and fasted for 40 days, and his body managed to eat the cancer and, lost a ton of weight, came back, and that actually bought him about another 10 months of life.
Wow.
And when it finally came back a third time was when he told his assistant, find everybody that ever said could go on it. Let's record it. It's all going to be over like 2 or 3 days, and then I'm just going to be done with it.
Wow.
But so his assistant's still releasing those out. But it just taught me to like never get prematurely frustrated with someone, never assume that you know what they're going through. And like as soon as I heard that, I was like, I've got to buy every book this guy's ever written and just read more of the knowledge that he had to put out there.
It's funny that you bring that up in terms of like what people are going through, because you never know what people are going through, and to always be kind. And I actually found a picture with Robin Williams the other day and put it on social media. And it says, everyone you meet is, was it fighting better? Or something?
Fighting a battle.
Yeah, that you know nothing about. Always be kind, essentially.
Yeah,
and that's Robin Williams' picture. Like it's like him. Like he's a foremost like leader in comedy and making people happy. But he was the most depressed person that ended up taking his own life. And even with Chadwick Boseman recently, the Black Panther, like he was doing movies at a high level that was very physical and very like you needed to be healthy. And he was fighting cancer that ended up killing him. And so it's like you never know what someone's going through. And so it's good that you had the mindset to not, chastise this person or come down on them, because they were literally fighting for their life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's funny you talk about going in the jungle. Part of my journey, my spiritual walk and everything that I'm into is led me to plant medicines, like sacred plant medicines. And whether it's Costa Rica, but Peru, I'm going to be going to Peru to do a plant medicine journey with ayahuasca.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've heard of this before, but basically it allows you to... You get these. You basically put one foot in the spiritual world, one foot here on the earthly plane, and some people find God, succinctly know what that feeling looks like. That want to do that. Some people find out how to become better people. They work on the ego. They learn how to become better parents, better business people, and there's something about getting back to nature. Whether you do plant medicines or whether you go fast in a jungle for 40 days, it brings you back to center. Brings you back to a place of wholeness and mindfulness, and just think about the things that he was able to do. He gave himself another 10-month lease on life when he was pretty much dead. So it's important to get checked out as men. We're coming up on Movember. I don't know, just kind of jumping down that rabbit trail, but I years ago found out about Movember, which is like raises awareness for men's cancers and different things. And so you'll wear a mustache for the month, which isn't really a thing that people do anymore. So it calls a little attention, like, why are you wearing the mustache? And so it's become a thing. It's led to a beard. But yeah, man, just, for all the men that are listening to this, it's okay to be masculine. It's okay to chase your dreams, and it's okay to ask for help, I would say.
Yeah.
And reach out to people, and you just never know what people are going through. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Beautiful, brother. So anything else in terms of you got looking forward to for 2020 or 2021 that you can kind of hope to get back to, or?
I'm really just excited. Love what I do for work. I'm excited to keep reading, and I'm excited that it seems like slowly things are kind of getting back to normal. It may be a new normal. I don't know if it'll ever exactly be the way that it was before, but I'm glad that it's starting to get where people can get out of the house some.
Yeah, I was listening to a comedian on the way over here, a soundbite through YouTube. This guy Tim Dillon, that's really big on the Comedy Store in LA, and Joe Rogan's a good buddy, and he was talking about the party's over, and the party's over in terms of like the way the economy was and the way that we operate as people, and just we really just we're gonna be in a new normal, even if it's temporary, but just take care of you, take care of the people around you, and lead a good life. So yeah,
exactly.
All right, brother. Well, thanks so much for your time. He's the amazing, the mighty, the powerful Candler Cook. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of the Jesse T Show.